Welcome back to Bringing Evangelion to America, the unofficial ultimate dive into the localization history of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Last time we looked at the ADV dub and the manga dub, and this time I'll take a look at the director's cut dub and the Funimation dub. But before that, we have a detour to make. In 2003, ADV announced they would be producing a live-action Evangelion movie. The movie would be, at least in the early stages of development, produced in conjunction with the Weta Workshop of New Zealand, most well known for their work on the Lord of the Rings movies. The movie never really got off the ground as production was plagued by various issues, and it was officially cancelled in 2011.
John was actually approached by some people at Weta about the idea of doing a live-action some anime, and titles were introduced, and Evangelion was the one they jumped on, saying, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah." They said, "We think we could do something with this," And at the time, they just wanted to produce some production sketches and so on. Said, "Well, let's go into getting negotiations with Gainax to make sure it's okay with them." And it went back and forth for a while, and there were a lot of things going behind the scenes at Gainax that we were not aware of at that time. But eventually, they came to some kind of agreement and agreed to let us start doing pre-production.
So my former husband, Matt Greenfield, he was one of the producers on the project. So yes, he was working on it a lot, all the time, constantly on, phone conferences with Weta in New Zealand, which is in a very, very different time zone than we were in. And, there was a lot of back and forth. They were working on the production designs for it. I mean, moving something from an idea of, okay, we have the rights to do this, to making it a real project is not a simple thing. And that was worked on for years and years and years.
I was learning a lot about ADV, and they were, back in the 90s and early 2000s, they were the unequivocal, just absolutely the leader in anime production in North America. And distribution, production, all that stuff. And they were talking, I remember they were talking about, oh yeah, we've been going to LA, we're talking about doing a live action type version of this. And, they were very, very involved.
There was always talk about a live action Evangelion.
I've heard about it for years, but nothing ever happened with it that I know of.
I heard about it, and I thought it was going to happen.
Yeah, I remember them talking about it, and I thought it would be great. But back then, it would have been a lot harder to do than it would be now, because special effects weren't as special as they are now, and they cost a lot more, and just a whole lot more that would have had to have gone into it. And they probably would have had to have come up with some sort of ending that made sense, and people aren't going to go see it if it's doesn't button up in some way, story-wise.
I heard a rumor about a live-action movie, and I always thought it would be interesting to see how they would bring that, to the screen. But I after that, I didn't hear any details, which makes sense since it never happened, right? So
I do remember hearing about that. That I remember, and I was like, "Oh, wow, that would be so exciting!" And I was looking forward to it, and then it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I was aware that they had announced it. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that it didn't happen, but I remember hearing that it was announced.
Myself and Larry Kotef were kind of the big contacts as far as that went, in terms of trying to keep the story on the rails. But it was very much all pie in the sky at that point.
It came across like most of the jobs we worked on, which was, apart from working with Peter, who was in Miramar, in the suburb where I live, the process of those films were more organic in the fact that we were sort of more appraised of what was going on. Whereas most other projects, they just, they wanted to get the story out there. They wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted to get the story out there. And they wanted arrive. Someone says, we'd like you guys to do the design work. Here's the project that we're working on. So it's sort of, you're always blindsided by something. It just comes in from out of the blue. This is the job we're working on. So that sort of hit like that. And it was off the back of being involved in a couple of, sort of really epic fantasy genres. So it was pretty exciting to sort of go, okay, we're going to be diving into something live action. No, it's not live action, something sci-fi, hard sci-fi, outside of European context. Pretty exciting.
That was, to be honest, one of my first projects starting at Workshop, and probably one of the first ones one of the reasons I was hired was because of my interest in robots. So I jumped in the deep end with that one, and sadly it didn't land, but it was, for the time that we were working on it, incredibly exciting because like I say, I went into it with full commitment that, well, this is a film that's going to happen. So I worked on it with that intensity. Well, even if it wasn't going to happen, I would have worked on it with full intensity, but like I said, I didn't even know that it wasn't possible and it couldn't be cancelled.
I was head of the design department at the time, and so I was across that project in that respect, but I ended up doing quite a bit of design work on it. There was, trying to think, there were 4 main designers on it. Most people in the design department, and generally how things work at Weta as a project comes through, at the time we were sort of at a size where one big film would occupy virtually, the whole company. So everyone would be thrown in to see, who gelled with the project well, whose design work was resonating with the director and anyone else involved. So most people would have had a bit of a crack at it to start with, and then the people who are getting the most success tend to run with the designs and sort of take on most of the design work from there. So it ended up being myself, Greg Broadmoor, Christian Pearce, and Stephen Crow would be the main names I can think of that were sort of working into it. And it ended up that 3 of us ended up sort of having the best success on one of the Avas each. So we each sort of took one of the Avas through to the sort of general level they got to before the project fell over. I was doing Ava 1, Christian Pearce was doing Ava 0, and Greg Broadmoor did Ava 2. I
just jumped straight in as a conceptual designer. And back in that day, we had no real management in the design department. There was no producers or anything like that. It was really just the conceptual designers themselves. And Richard Taylor, of course, he was directly involved, as he is with everything. And of course, the very experienced designers like Ben Wooten and Warren Mahi and others like that who got their hands in. And so we were just following their leads. I was just like, how do you do this conceptual design thing? This is like, that's how early what I was to it. There was no hierarchy or anything like that. It was just jump in. So I just jumped in the deep end and actually started working on Ava 2 almost straight away, I think.
We never actually worked with a director on Evangelion. And that makes it really difficult because the imagery you come up with is only ever going to be approved by the director. And you can get, the producers and the people that we were involved in liked the direction it's going in. But as soon as you attach someone and they start actually being involved, then everything we've done could very easily just be put to the side and taken in a new direction.
Right before we started releasing images from it, the original producer, who is a guy who'd worked on a couple of well-known science fiction shows, but the scope he kept producing looked like television stuff. And that's what we felt. So he's not thinking big enough. So we brought in a different producer, and that producer started expanding what we do and started talking major name directors and blah, blah, blah. And we got to the point where we were talking I went and talked with a bunch of major name directors, both in person and on the phone, including, I remember being on the set of Transformers talking with people, but no video was ever actually shot. No miniatures were built. It was all sketches.
There was certainly no live action footage done off the designs we did, because nothing ever got off the page as far further than a drawing for us. None of it even made it into sort of like serious final design work. Like there's sort of like all of the Avas got drawn to a certain level, are all the same, so you could put them up together and see them in whatever form they got to. But there was no way that was anywhere near ready for going any further than that. At that point, they were just more realistic looking frames from the animation. There was never really any real consideration of turning those into 3D assets, either physically or digitally. It didn't really get very far.
We were doing purely conceptual design. I don't remember there being a script. Maybe there was some parts of a script, but really we were just referring, there wasn't, we knew elements that needed to be designed, but they weren't specifically elements from a script. So that's actually quite a wasteful period, right? Because you're exploring all the possible territory and none of the practical territory where you know exactly what's going to be in the production. At that point, probably ADV were probably guessing at the elements that would probably be in the film.
But basically, ultimately, it came down to we got enough people interested to move to the next stage, at which point our lawyers did a double check and said, okay, well, we need to finalize some of this contract stuff with Gainax before we can go any further and commit any money. At which point it turned out that Gainax actually could not guarantee the things they had originally said they could guarantee in terms of production. And this is ultimately, the rights to the title were in contention. So ultimately the whole thing fell apart because even though we had paid for the rights, there was a question as whether or not the rights we had paid for were enough to actually secure a production. And no big studio is going to go into a production saying, well, maybe you got the rights. You got to have a piece of paper that says 100%. And of course, knowing in retrospect that that's about the time that Anno was splitting with Gainax and trying to take the Ava property with him.
Everything got lined up, and even though they were getting closer and closer to being able to put the pieces together, say around like 2008 probably, and that's, you're talking 5 years in by that point, the big thing that happened is that Anno broke off from Gainax and he founded Studio Kara. And when he did that, I don't know all the mechanisms involved, but Anno took the rights of Evangelion with him to Studio Kara, meaning Gainax no longer controlled that intellectual property. So all of the contracts, all of the dealings, everything that had been done between ADV and Gainax and Weta, it just ceased to exist because Gainax no longer had any control over Evangelion. So that's really when it all fell apart.
It was just there one day and then gone.
I know that I did hear that people were still trying to get it off the ground, but I mean that's at least 7 years after we saw the last of it at the workshop, probably more. So by that time, I think that's people really just sort of shopping it around, desperately trying to get it going, I think. We certainly weren't attached anymore, and I don't know if it would have come back to us at that point.
I think probably the flame was still alive, it certainly was with all of us. We wanted it to continue on. But there was nothing meaningful happening towards it, even after, probably, when did I start? 2002, so maybe in 2003 there's meaningful work done towards it, but beyond that, It
was always basically Weta's baby. They were the ones who said, we can do this, we can do something amazing, and they were fantastic, and some of the things that we were talking about were just interesting ideas. It's like, I remember we were talking about shooting an introductory scene to kind of introduce the world, where Shinji would be sitting on the corner of a building with a fishing rod. And as the camera slowly pulls back, you start realizing, okay, he's fishing off a building that's submerged in the ocean. And everyone thought that was a cool idea as to how to do it. And I said, you know what? I know we could film that for real. There's a place in California where there's a town that was actually buried under a lake. They built a lake and And if you go there, at least at that time, you could still go there, and all the buildings were still sticking out of the water, so you could just shoot it right there for real. You didn't have to fake anything.
I was excited by it. I think there's so much visceral speed and power in the animation, in the animation. The scale of things is crazy, and I was really excited to see that being realized well, live action. The sort of the forces involved, the scale of things happening. It was a super exciting idea, and beginning to think about it as a live action event was pretty exciting. The caveat to that is, could have been a horrible disaster, and the animations are so good, I'm not sure we ever needed a live action film. So in my mind, our only job for Evangelion wasn't to design Evangelion. It's already done, and if we were to try and redesign it would be a terrible, terrible mistake. What we had to try and do was adapt it to a live action situation using the physical world we know and the sci-fi aspect of Evangelion, and try and marry those two things in a form which fits the animation, and we haven't redesigned the wheel for any reason. It's super important, and there's a lot of, I'm going to say, bravery in that decision. For a director to come into a film and not want to put their own stamp on it and make it their own, and actually say what was good is good still, and it's a brave decision to actually say I'm not going to change it and make it my own. And that's the same for any, I think, if you can do that where it's applicable, then that's as a valid decision as making brave design choices and breaking a ceiling and making something different, in my mind.
And I do think the emotional core of that show has plenty to work on to make a great movie, a series of movies.
And there were several drafts of the script, which the biggest change was that it did relocate the action from Japan to the U.S. That was one of the things that was felt early on, was that if it's set in Japan, you might as well do it in Japan with an all-Japanese cast. If you're doing a Western version, you might as well just rebuild the whole thing. And this is one of the things that ultimately I think would have been a big sticking point with the fan base. But the script adaptations went all over the map. We went to several drafts of the script, and some of them were just like, I don't even understand where this is going. But I think there was one early draft of the script where Shinji goes to Nerve and he goes into training, and it's him and like 200 girls. All it's like, why are there 200 girls? And no one could explain how these 200 girls got in there, other than the fact that they wanted to have a picture with a lot of girls in little skin-tight outfits. I said, no, there's basically just the handful of kids.
The scope of movies like that, it's a nice dream, but I think once people start looking at it on paper, it's like, oh, that's a lot.
To do it right, I mean, I think it really would need to be big budget, in order to pull it off.
I mean, I think it could work. Look at Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Stephen Chan's film. I mean, there are people who are good at doing that stuff. You have to find the right director and special effects and art people, because it can also look horrible. But, The Matrix, I mean, yeah, why not?
I am not at all sure that you could really do Eva and do it justice. You could make a mecha movie out of it, there's no question, but I don't know if you could do Eva in its, I don't want to say philosophical purity, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. The essence of it that is somehow beyond simply a mecha movie. I don't know if you could get that across in live action.
I definitely think it can be done. But it's not just about the action. I think that there is also a lot of the characters can't just be kind of cardboard cutout characters. I mean, there's a lot of depth to these characters as well. So you've got to have people that are very emotive I think that could play those roles as well.
I would love to see it in live action. I think that would be great because think about all the advances in CGI and everything that they're doing now.
I think most things could work in live action. I think most things are not essential in live action.
Evangelion could definitely work. It should be live action.
If they wanted to make it good, it would be so incredibly expensive. I mean, I'd love to see that if they could do it. I also want to be in it, so let's do it. But yeah, I mean, can you imagine just creating the Avas like that, and just all the stuff? I mean, so much of the eerie quality and is all because it's animated. So much of the kind of shots, I should say, so to speak, and the sky and all of that, and it's there's just a lot of things are able to be done because it's animated. But if you got a really fantastic team, I mean, a really visionary director, I think it could be done. You would just have to have a gigantic budget. I wouldn't want it to be done cheesy. Like, I would only want it to be done if it was done massive,
I think it would be very doable, especially now in the 21st century with all the technicality around us. We're able to do all kinds of stuff. I think it'd be exciting.
I don't know. I mean, they've done so many versions of it now. I'm like, why not do it? But then there's this, it feels like this is one of the premier animated series that really took off 25, 30 years ago. And so it kind of seems not right in a way to try to make it live action, that it should stay in its own genre. But I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be cool visually. It could be really cool. They just have to decide how they wanted it to work.
I think it could, especially now with all the special effects they can do. I think it'd be wonderful.
I have a feeling that it's a good thing it was canceled, because, I mean, what we have in our mind, something like that can never, even with the best CGI ever, can never be matched. It would be weird, and it would feel dirty in a way. Does that make sense? The only reason you'd be doing it is trying to milk more money out of it, and people know that. You're not being true. Does that make sense? It's not like, oh, let's see what happens with these characters. No, like, oh, let's see if we can make. And yes, it's a business that's going to happen, but it's usually what happens is the people that don't know about it and go see it are disappointed, and then the people that have been fans are also disappointed. You please know. So I think it's an interesting idea, but I'm glad it didn't happen.
The movie Pacific Rim had a lot of the elements of Evangelion. There was a lot of homage to Evangelion in a couple of scenes as well. And so seeing that, I'm like, okay, I guess we could have made an Evangelion movie. But you'd have to find a really, really talented kid to play Shinji.
It was an exciting time. There were some interesting ideas. I think one thing that really appealed to me about it was that Weta was very serious about doing it as practical as possible. They were going to do all the Eva stuff with men in suits or bunraku puppets as opposed to digital, because that's what they really wanted. It was the sketches they were producing were amazing, but it was one of several productions they were trying to get going at the same time. And ultimately, when we could not get the rights cleared completely, they had to move on to other things.
We only saw a very thin slice of it. We didn't see. We only approached the visuals. We looked at, and only a very thin slice of that as well. The amount of time we actually got to spend on the project and how deep we dived into it was never very much, because it was never a fully greenlit project. There was never an overarching vision for it brought to it by a director. It was never a script, so it could only ever be ephemeral ideas and vagaries. Yeah, it's just a shame. That makes the process that much harder as well. It means you can go a long way into a process or into a look and feel that everyone seems comfortable with, not knowing it's totally wrong for the person who takes over, or it doesn't go anywhere because there is no vision, so you just sort of end up floundering. It's a difficult situation to be in when a project's at that stage and it's not moving forward through those next stages and gates.
I still have that sense that could be an amazing film, so I do hope someone comes back to it, because it would be incredible, and it really deserves it.
In 2004, ADV would release 2 DVD volumes covering the director's cut episodes. These were the original home media versions of episodes 21 through 24 released in Japan, which featured newly added scenes. For ADV's release, they would not only dub the new scenes, but also almost entirely redub the pre-existing scenes, although some of the recordings from the original dub were also used. The first volume was released on January 13th with Director's Cut episodes 21 through 23, and the second volume was released on March 9th with Director's Cut episode 24 and versions of episodes 25 and 26 that had the new actors brought in for the Director's Cut, dubbing over the old ones.
The final finished version as it existed wasn't actually finished until after we released the last volume of the TV series, because what Gainax did is they held back those last couple of episodes and redid them using footage that was produced for Death and Rebirth.
Well, I knew about that. I knew about that from Matt. Matt told me, and I had known for quite a while about the additional footage and how that was created for the home video version in Japan. And it took years to negotiate that, because for a long time, the rights for that additional TV series footage, even though it is a TV series and ADV released the TV series, but that footage got kind of all tied up with the rights of, Death and Rebirth and End of Evangelion.
Our original license for the rights expired, or was going to expire, and we went into renegotiation, and they said, well, we want a lot more. Of course you do. All right, well, if we want a lot more, our argument was, then we want all new masters. We want the same masters you're using for the super deluxe version you did for the Japanese release.
So finally, when they were able to sort of disentangle all of that, we were finally able to record that.
We did spend months trying to locate some of the actors. And after that, we became really big on trying to track actors constantly. But initially, we had no idea. Who knew when we did the show originally, we're going to need to come back and re-record parts of it X number of years later?
How many times do I have to tell you? Kaji's gone! I'm sure, let's see, I was in Houston, so same regular channels, just phone call or email back then, I guess. No! None of this is the real me!
So I was really excited to be able to get to go back and be Asuka again and do those scenes. And I can remember so clearly recording that, and I actually said, if this had been in Ava the whole time, if people had always been able to see this, they would have been so much more sympathetic to Asuka if these scenes had always been in it. And I think that's true, and I think that's what happened, because really, after that came out, that to me is really when there started to be a big shift in the sort of whole best girl debate and the feelings about Asuka and Rey. And it really did. I think it made a huge difference for people to be able to see a lot more of Asuka's backstory, what happened to her and why she is the way she is.
It's no good. I can't read his lips from all the way up here.
Oh, well, Matt just called. I mean, Matt's the original, the OG of the OGs of the O to the Gs.
Well, I guess it's time to go.
Yeah, I sort of remember doing it, and Matt contacted me, but it's weird that I remember the Amanda 2002 more.
You mean they're going to Antarctica now? Jason Douglas sent me a letter and made me aware about it. And it was a nice letter. It said, "Are you Brian Lunde?" So it was like, I guess he just sent random letters to random Brian Lundes. And I was like, oh, yeah, hey. And I gave him a call, and I went down there, and I spent a little time in the booth.
I think we only found Guil Lunde like a week before we started recording those episodes.
The situation must be really bad. They're all gone.
I wish I could say that I did, but I honestly don't recall it.
All right, but this one will see them as well.
I don't recall that either.
Mama, who are you?
No. I don't.
That's why I'm at Seeley after all. For Shinji.
Brother, I don't know. I can't remember how that one came about.
There were 2 or 3 characters we either couldn't replace or they just weren't interested in coming back to Houston or whatever.
I was very, very, very pregnant and could not travel. That's it. I was pregnant and I couldn't travel.
Yeah, that does sound right. I mean, yeah, back then we would drive often to go home because we had no money. We were, back then we were young, and so we drive. So every little financial decision, and so if we drove, her being pregnant probably had a huge amount to do with, if we were going to drive, she was not going to fly, and even flying pregnant is fairly difficult.
And things weren't as linked up now as they are now. So it wasn't like, it was really difficult to do, like, put me in a studio here, then they'd have to rent the studio space here and make sure the link worked and link it back to Texas. And it's a big, big mess. Whereas now it's easy to do. Now we all have our own recording booths in our own, in our houses. But back then it just didn't work out.
I think they probably wanted to go with someone who had more experience. So I can only assume that. Or maybe they didn't have my contact information.
Cal Sturdivant did not know what had happened to him. He showed up about 8 months later, actually. Too late.
I have no memory of being asked or being sought out.
I was still in Houston when they were doing the first redub. And I was, as I say, persona non grata by that time.
Yes, we cannot allow Unit 1 to be touched by an angel.
One day, Matt Greenfield said to me, he goes, hey, Tristan MacAvery is no longer part of the organization, and we were wondering, do you think you could sort of voice match his character, Gendo? And I was like, well, I'll give it a try. And I did, and they said, oh, that's wonderful, and that's great, sounds wonderful. And so I kind of took over the role from there.
And of course, he started off as Asuka's dad and then became Shinji's dad. So go figure that one out.
But yeah, it's been a fun character. He was the very first bad dad I ever played.
Matt told me, we're bringing you in for Pen Pen. Can you do any penguin noises? And I was like, what is a penguin noise? I don't know what a penguin sounds like. He's like, we don't either. Just go based on like what the original performance was. And that's what I did. I just listened to the Japanese and I just mimicked it as best I could. I still don't know what a penguin is supposed to sound like. Before I got cast in Ava, I watched End of Evangelion, and me and all my friends sat down to watch it, and we were like, whoa, it blew our minds. And so when it was time to actually do the director's cut and I got asked to do Pen Pen, I was just completely blown away because he was my favorite part of the original series. He's just my literal spirit animal, so it was a huge honor. I think it's as simple as she voiced Pen Pen originally, and since I was replacing those lines, they just had me go ahead and grab those handful that needed to be filled in. So it was just like, you're here, that's what she did. She does, it made sense to me, and I was just really glad they didn't have to have me replace a whole bunch. And as far as the Ray lines that I actually replaced, can count them on one hand. Like, I definitely only did 3 or 4. So they are such quick moments. You blink and you miss it. You definitely wouldn't notice that it was recast because they're weird moments that are not her just being herself. Like weird clone monster Ray was basically what Matt was saying. So I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. I don't know if they got lucky with that or what, but I didn't have to replace any like normal Ray lines.
So originally when I took over the role, they asked me if I could, what we call voice matching. And the idea is that we're not trying to copy it and fool anyone, it's an actor replacing another actor, but the character had been established, so we wanted to sound sort of in the same vein as what Tristan had done originally.
I've given the old men of Seeley something else to look at.
I've given the old men of Seeley something else to look at.
And I knew Tristan. I had met him several times and worked with him. And I think at one point he was a director and he directed me in some stuff. And so I knew Tristan and I knew about him and stuff. But my goal was to go in and not try to sound like Tristan, but sort of just capture the essence that he had already created with Gendo, and then go in and give it my own little spin. I wasn't hell bent on like, I'm going to make this my own. I mean, I wanted to keep it as true and as close to what he had done as originally possible, because that's who, he was the first one to do it. But eventually I just it evolved into my own take on it.
Obviously, I was working with Matt. Matt is amazing. He's the best director. He was my favorite director to work with. Nothing, just unshakable, unflappable, so patient, but, just he knows exactly what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And I never had any trouble working with him, and I'm difficult to work with. I'm sensitive, and he never had any issues with me. He was always extremely patient with me from go, and I think originally he saw me as just like a kid that's running around the studio. So I totally appreciate everything that ended up getting made with him, because it's just the best work.
When we got the additional footage and dubbed all of that, I think it really changed people's perspective about Asuka. She was a much more sympathetic figure. You learned a lot more about her, like why she had all these issues and how she was so traumatized and why she was the way she was. And then also, by that point, I had been playing Asuka for a few years, so I felt very, very comfortable in the role, and I felt very confident about my performance as Asuka, that yeah, I got this. I know Asuka.
It's a call from Germany, Asuka. I think it's your mother. It's a call for you from Germany, Asuka. I think it's your mother.
It's interesting. Every time when we do something like that, we go and you re-record. It's usually, maybe it's because the technology is far better now. Technology takes you, so you get a better recording than we did back then. Maybe.
Why did we do that? Why was it because, was that when all the digital stuff started coming in? And I think it was more that. I could be lying.
So it will match. Like so that you're doing it all at the same time, and you're on the same microphone, and so you have that fluidity. Because let's say if you, and I'm sorry, I don't remember this all well enough from I think we recorded it in 2003 or something, but I don't remember it well enough to tell you exactly what any of the lines were. But you've got a recording that you did 6 or 7 years ago, and now you're going to go in and just record that one line. It's probably not going to sound right. It's going to be in a different booth. It's on a different microphone.
Damn him, I hate the way he ignores me. Damn him, I hate the way he ignores me.
So in order to get that quality, you really do have to just, redo the whole scene. So it is necessary for it to sound right.
Well, the idea was to use as much as possible the original. However, sometimes the video didn't match up. It was actually different video. The scene would be longer, the scene would be shorter, the lip flaps would be at a different place in there. So in some cases, it was like, yeah, we can make that fit well enough, but that looks terrible. So in those cases, the actor would come in and re-record the line in order to fit. And sometimes that meant the line had to be extended slightly or shortened slightly because it wasn't quite the exact same. So we did that when it was necessary. And I know there were a couple of characters whose lines were fairly murky to begin with. So we went ahead and, basically got a better read on it. Also, there were some cases where we had recorded alternate takes for some lines, and we used the alternate takes from the original recording as opposed to the original because they fit better.
You haven't changed at all, and how this affects me is inconsequential.
You haven't changed at all, and how this affects me is inconsequential.
I have a feeling that Matt played me, a little bit of what I had done, and then I tried to emulate that.
If I recall, that's what we did. We played the original performance as it was there and said, it's okay, but it needs, can you enunciate it a little more.
I was a little rusty because it had been a few years. So, I feel I probably caught up, or we got some good reads.
And I would think it was pretty close. I mean, it really wasn't that many years later. It was maybe like 7-ish years later.
There were some cases where it was like, well, that's not going to work because now the line is now 4 flaps and it was originally 3 or something like that.
Wunderbar. Now's my chance.
I don't know, because that's always been absolutely one of my very favorite lines ever.
If I recall correctly, that was because Wunderbar no longer fit. It was a slightly different edit or version of the scene, and we put the Wunderbar in, and it didn't work. And then, of course, the original the line in Japanese is actually Chansu. So he said, well, let's see if this time now was my chance, which we tried to work like crazy to make work on the original, and didn't. This time it fit in like a glove. It was like, oh, okay. So it was going back to the original Japanese dialogue.
I'm Asuka. Asuka Langley Soryu. Charmed, huh?
Honestly, I believe at the time it was the fact that getting those actors in to do that line, we were going to do it and then realized, okay, well, we didn't have Amanda to do it with, so then we'd have to do the others. So we ended up just doing what we ended up doing.
I don't really remember how long it took. A couple days. Not a couple of days of like 8 hours a day for a couple of days, but usually you do about 2 to 3 hours at a time. But that could have been, we could have done like 6 or 8 hours total over a couple of days.
I was there for about maybe about a week or less than a week. 3 or 4 days.
I really had fun, but the crazy thing is that it was a very quick session. Obviously, there wasn't a whole lot to fill in. I think it was probably one session, maybe an hour.
Most of the actors were coming in and only taking an hour to record everything. Our system had improved so much in terms of how we did things. We were able to fly through it a lot quicker that way. But just basically, at that point, most of the actors remember their characters like, oh yeah, right back into it, no problem. So it was much smoother, and I think we did the whole thing, in like 6 weeks, something like that. The only one we actually tracked down is I actually did go to New York to get Aaron Krohn to re-record.
I was living in New York when I did that last couple, so I went into a studio. They got me into a studio in New York to do those last couple.
Did at Mike Center Nicholas's studio. In his original studio was this little tiny box, and we're all shoved into there. And Aaron's in what was basically a shower curtain, a shower area with the glass shower walls, and this little tiny thing. And we did the whole thing, and we flew out to New York just to do that. But other than that, if we couldn't find them and they weren't available in the Houston area,
I flew back to Houston for an on-camera job once. But it was not for voiceover. So I want to say I did not fly back to Houston for that. Wait a minute. No, you know what? I'm not sure. I want to say, yeah, I flew back for something, but now I don't recall if it was for that or for the on-camera thing.
Yeah, I honestly don't even remember how we pulled that off.
Yes, they all came to the Houston studio. We had some of the stuff. At some point, I think I was doing some work with one of the studios in California, and I think might have had a pickup line or two done there where something wasn't clear, but I can't remember anymore.
So as far as this area is concerned, it was like going back into, the same old job. It's like, hey guys, how you doing? Let's do it again. Woo! And we did it.
I've never seen it. No. And the reason for that is I don't like watching my own work.
I actually really haven't seen much of the director's cut. I think at the time I was just really busy and stressed out, and then I may have lost track of my DVD. But again, it's such a small role. I think it was hard for me to even find where I was. And I wasn't the kind of person who's like, I got to pour through this entire, volume to find the 2 seconds of me. I'd been in enough small stuff where I was like, this is way smaller than any of that. And I didn't do that with that stuff, so I'm not going to do it here. But I always knew eventually I would be able to sit down and, pick out the lines and be like, oh, yeah, that's it. But I think it's been enough to just be like, yeah, somewhere in that show, I'm in it.
Very shortly following the Director's Cut DVDs, ADV would release the Platinum Collection DVDs across 7 volumes beginning July 27, 2004. This release would feature remastered video and audio, as well as a slew of new bonus features, including Mythology of Evangelion, a 2-part segment of Matt Greenfield and Sean McCoy giving their personal interpretations of Eva, That Little Red-Haired Girl, where Tiffany Grant showed off her Asuka collection, and various commentary tracks.
We were talking about, what needed, we would go over, have production meetings saying, what titles need to be released, what do we want to release next? And sales was coming in saying, we want more Ava. I said, what do you mean you want more Ava? You've got the director's cut. Yes, and they're selling really well, but people are saying if they had the whole thing, it'd sell even better. So, well, that got pushed onto the front burner. Like I said, we were originally not planning on doing that quickly. But it was they were just like, yes, we really. Everyone's asking for new box sets.
Wade Shimwell, he was the audio engineer who was doing the mix on Ava to do the Dolby 5.1 surround sound. And he kept having these horrible accidents where he would fall and break his leg or something. There was always something happening. Like, oh my God, what's happened to Wade now? Well, he is working on Ava. I'm like, oh, okay, curse of the Ava. But every time, it's easy to attribute anything like that. It just seems like, well, I guess it's just the curse of Ava.
One change that slept through that's always bugged me, which is in one of the early episodes, they're in the big red truck talking about Shinji getting brain damage. When what they actually should have been saying was contamination, and that went through the entire proof checking process, and nobody flagged it, and I didn't even think about it when I recorded it in the studio. And then afterwards, people are going like, "Oh, isn't that supposed to be the thing, contamination?" They said it's like, that's exactly what they should have been saying. Well, damn. And if I recall correctly, I went back and fixed that for the Platinum Edition.
You don't think it could be brain damage, do you? You don't think it could be contamination, do you?
But really, I mean, at that point, it was this kind of default thing that, DVDs have to have bonus features. And the Japanese are not real big on making bonus features, especially not for anime. So it was kind of like we're manufacturing, bonuses just so there's something new on there. We had a couple of marketing meetings saying, what do people want? And ultimately, let's get a couple of people who are Ava fans to come in and talk about Ava. And we ended up, we got one. So it was myself and John McCoy talking about Ava.
So there was a, this remastering that came out in Japan. And so Matt Greenfield wanted to release this, Platinum Edition and wanted to add extra features. And he had organized, I believe, Allison Jeffy and a bunch of others to basically give these on-camera interviews about the deeper meaning of Evangelion, with all of the objectivity a person not in any way involved in the original production could provide. It was supposed to be, I think, a lot more than it was. And I don't think everyone is as unconcerned with their legacy as I am.
We tried to get Carl Horn, he declined. To me, the optimum panel would have been to have Carl Horn there, because I think I've done a lot of panels with Carl Horn, and Carl's perspective is very different since he's so well affiliated with the manga, but he also knows a lot of the people behind the scenes. It was a lot more familiar with them at the time we were doing the show. And again, that was something that was done fairly quickly. We brought Sean down, and he and I took turns commenting on the show.
I wonder if it's gotten more dramatic in my memory since the actual day. But at least when I tell it at cocktail parties, it seems to get more dramatic every time. But basically, I was not given any information besides what episodes I was going to speak over on the commentary tracks, and a very rough like we're just going to ask a bunch of questions about, I think, character relationships or something like that. But it was basically like I was being interviewed for a position at a company I did not know I applied for. It was, but I kind of enjoy that, so it worked out fine. And it led to, a meme or two, so that's fine. The questions from mythology were not provided to me beforehand, and my memory of what ended up on the video versus what I actually said, it's not, the comparison isn't perfect. There were a lot of questions, speaking of the patterns of three, that, you have the guy and two girls pattern throughout a lot of the character drama, and going into that, I believe a lot of that did not end up in the mythology, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember talking about that quite a bit.
But basically, what I was just doing is going through the usual pitch. I get, how many questions do I get at an anime convention? Okay, what are the questions I usually get? Blah blah blah.
So the mythology of Evangelion was like I felt like I was the one arguing towards the Lacanian psychological breakdown of the characters. This is the reconciliation of opposites of a 14-year-old. And instead of using 1900s psychological terms, they're using classic Zohar and Kabbalistic terms. So I thought I was going to bring all of that nerd info to it, but it seemed to be like that was the only opinion that ended up on mythology, and so it kind of felt like, without it being a conflict, maybe it wasn't as fun as it could have been. Yeah, I think basically it didn't have all of the bricks it needed to build that house, and it could have been a lot more. So beforehand, I had asked Carl, because he wasn't interested in doing this. I asked Carl on for things that he wanted me to share specifically, but I think it wasn't enough to uh, assemble something that we would look at a bit more fondly these days.
We actually shot that in a weird setup in a room that wasn't even actually part of ADV at the time. There was a building next door that was had just emptied out after a fire, and we went in there and we recorded it in there for some reason, because it was the only place we could set up the lights and everything.
That was a Matt Greenfield idea, and he called it The Little Red-Haired Girl, which is actually a reference to Charlie Brown. But, we showed off a lot of the Asuka collection that I had at the time. I've acquired much, 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 much more Asuka merchandise since then. And, it's fun for me. I like collecting the Asuka stuff. I just think it's really cool. I'm an Asuka fan.
Yeah, but no, we had so much fun with that. I do remember that commentary. I would have loved to have done more of that.
Yeah, I remember we had a chat. We were sitting there just talking about it, and I was like, this is fun. This is cool. I like this. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
We did that like 20 years ago, so I don't remember it super, super well.
I was told the episodes I was doing, I think it was 20, 22, and either 25 or 26, I forget. One of them I ended up not being able to do because my taxi driver got lost. It's a very clear memory in my head of being annoyed that a guy did not know their way around Houston. Besides that, so I was not told the episodes until the day I got there, and I had not seen episode 20 for probably like two or 3 weeks prior. So I wasn't able to speak fast enough because I didn't have cues built up in my head. If you were to compare 20 to 26, I think I speak as if I'm absurdly caffeinated on 26. It's because I actually had some bullet points that I wanted to hit. Where 20, I'm riffing, basically. I could have accomplished more with my time. I could have done more to inspire the fandom, but I imagine had I prepared for a year, I would still not make the whole Evangelion fandom satisfied.
It's time once again for another detour. While ADV and Manga Entertainment were releasing the Evangelion anime, Viz Media was releasing the Evangelion manga. Even though it was only 14 volumes long, it took many years for the manga to be completed. The first collected volume would be released in America in July of 1998. Carl Horn would serve as editor of the manga until volume 12, which was released March 15, 2011. The final 2 volumes, released on November 2nd, 2012 and November 25th, 2014, would be edited by Mike Montesa.
So when I got into college, the first thing I did was go look for the anime club. And in the anime club, there was somebody a year ahead of me who said, who was already working for Viz, and she said that they're going to start a new magazine called Manga Vision, and they're looking for more translators. Are you interested? When she found out that I was a Japanese speaker and interested in manga and anime. And so that's how I got started. I think back then they just assigned us, or they just gave us like a list of manga and said, are you interested in this? And we said, yay! So I was familiar with Mr. Sadamoto's artwork as an illustrator, starting from Nadia and Secret of Blue Water. So just seeing like his art as a manga, like every panel seemed like an amazing work of art. So everything was a good scene for me. Back then they had the literal translator and then the rewriter. And the literal translator just translated the Japanese into legible English, and then the rewriter takes care of the jokes. We explain the jokes in the brackets, spell out the sound effects and what it is, and then the rewriter makes it into American comic-ese back then. Well, I had all the animages, which gave a lot of information, backstory, and like explained the whole stuff in interviews. So I pretty much had read up a lot on Eva. Yeah, I think it started as trade paperbacks, right? I mean, like 30-page comics that you see in the comic book store, right? And then it got compiled into the graphic novels. And they sent me the graphic novels sometimes, but by the time I saw those, it was, way long past any chance of adjusting things. So yeah, so the workload increased, and I was getting a lot of titles, and I would think I was starting to get swamped. And I think that was when Please Save My Earth started, and Basara. And I really wanted to make sure that those were properly taken care of, because I knew that Eva was going to be fine with Fred and Carl Horn, and it was esoteric and complicated, but still kind of straightforward. But something like Please Save My Earth and Basara needed like a finer attention, and I knew that I didn't really want to hand it over to anybody else. So I think that was a choice that I had to make, which I would probably regret now, but I think at the time that was the right decision.
I was basically just assigned it. We do our acquisitions process, and various things come up, and that probably was on the list at the time. And it was like, okay, who wants Evangelion? I'm like, okay, I'm in for it. Some other people probably wanted it, and my boss just happened to choose me. What I worked on were the last 2 volumes of the manga series, and if I recall correctly, it took quite a long time for that manga series to be finished. And just the way that we published manga in general changed over those years. So by the time those last 2 volumes came out, it was a challenge to kind of get them to conform to the format and the design that the earlier ones had, because it had been so long. And we had kind of changed our production method, and even the graphic design approach was a little bit different. We had to maintain some consistency, right? So that it would look like, okay, yes, that's part of the set. At the same time, we had to make it fit into the current methodology that we had. Currently, the way we produce manga in general is to try to maintain the overall structure of the Japanese version into the English version. So that if you open it up and you find the table of contents, say on page 3 in the Japanese version, it'll be on page 3 in the English version. That's a very simple way to put it. the older manga that we published often would rearrange the way that the books were set up, right? So maybe the table of contents in the Japanese version on page 3 would be on page 5 in ours for whatever reason, you know, or maybe they moved the page with the author comments to a different place or added something here or there. If you have the original single volume English editions of the Evangelion manga, Carl Horn's, the original editor's essays are in the back of the book, and they're really lengthy. And that necessitated, again, some rearranging of the structure. I like Evangelion, but I don't have the depth of knowledge that he does. And I kind of felt that would be just weird anyway for somebody else to pick up on that. Plus, there were other licensing considerations that had changed. The original publishers and the rights holders in Japan had shifted around, and the people who were approving things had changed and that sort of thing. And getting that kind of material cleared in the environment we were in at that time would have probably been a lot more difficult and more time consuming, and we didn't have a lot of time anyway. So that's why you don't see anything from me commenting on it at the end of those two. And really, if you've got Carl's commentary there, you don't need me. I also worked on the 3-in-1 editions that we put out. I think it was 5 volumes, a couple years later, and that was the one where we were down to the wire on some of the deadlines, waiting for Japan to clear things. That definitely gave me a few headaches. I'm just happy that I was able to be a part of all of it. You know, obviously it's a really big part of the overall anime and manga sphere. You know. And to be able to say that, yeah, I've had a part in that, I've had my hand in it, is pretty cool.
Besides the main Evangelion manga series, there are also several spin-off series. The first of these, Angelic Days, would be released in America by ADV Manga from April 30th, 2006 to August 31st, 2007. Every other Evangelion manga would be released by Dark Horse Manga. These include Shinji Ikari Racing Project from July 8th, 2009 to August 29th, 2018, Evangelion Comic Tribute on February 20th, 2013, Shinji Ikari Detective Diary from September 4th, 2013 to April 2nd, 2014, Tony Takazaki's Evangelion on May 27th, 2015, and the first 2 of 5 volumes of Legends of the Pico Pico Middle School Students from May 10th, 2017 to December 27th, 2017. All of the manga released by Dark Horse would be edited by Carl Horn, with the only exception being Campus Apocalypse, released on September 1st, 2010 to June 22nd, 2011, which was edited by Jemiah Jefferson.
I was essentially forced into it. And so when Campus Apocalypse came through and was approved and everything, suddenly they're just like, okay, and now you're going to edit this series. And I had solo edited maybe 2 or 3 things at that point, and I was just like, yes! This is gonna rule! And then I actually read the material, which took a while because it had to be translated first and then relettered so that I could then read, the dialogue along with the material that's in the panel. And I refused to read the scripts, read the lettering scripts before it had actually been married with the art, because I'm like, that's not gonna tell me what this does. Also, it was kind of a slightly rushed time frame, so once I had been assigned to edit that series, I just kind of had to wait until the lettering was finished, and it was all done more or less all at the same time. Certainly, like, each volume was all presented to me all at once, so I could just read and engage with each volume as it was. And it was a nice, smooth process, which is not necessarily the case with editing. In manga, it tends to be a lot easier because the material's already done. At most, you have to hire someone to translate it. So with that, in the case of Campus Apocalypse, the translator had already been established. I didn't have to hire them or anything. Essentially, all I had to do was wait for the materials to roll in, look at them, make sure that they were okay, and get the process going of having it printed. So it was a very, very pleasant and wonderful experience as an editor, which I'm really grateful for. And I'm really grateful for being able to continue to work on other Evangelion adaptations that Dark Horse has done. We've done 4, I think, maybe only 3. But that I have actually been editorially involved with each one of those, mainly because the person who actually is the editor of those books, Carl Horn, knows how much I love Evangelion, and that I am happy to do anything that gets the stuff into print and gets it out there. The adapter reads the material in its original language in this particular case, because Carl actually can read Japanese. He can speak Japanese kind of okay. He's only been practicing for like 35 years, so he's kind of okay. Not great, but he's okay. But he can read and glean a lot of sort of contextual nuance out of the language and body language that I wouldn't necessarily have, not knowing almost any Japanese. And so he assisted with the translation of the script, and then brushed up the script to localize it, to make it more, to sort of bring it more to a Western perspective. He's very, very good at that. And being an editor means doing a lot of paperwork. You figure out how many pages it is, and then you make documents saying how many pages it is, and then you turn in those documents, and then you write all the stuff that goes on the cover and goes on the copyright page and on the back of the cover and on the spine, and you turn that in at a particular time, and you know what the names of all the artwork is, and you know how many pages it is, and so you make documents that say all that, and then you turn those in. And then those go to the printer, and so they know what it's supposed to look like. And then when it comes back from the printer, you look at it and make sure that every page is there and that they're correct, and then you sign off on it, and then that happens a couple of times. That's what being an editor is. So, solo editing projects like Campus Apocalypse were just so smooth, so pleasant. I just figured out where everything went, wrote the paperwork, got to read the story over and over again, was able to find errors in the text after I'd read it like 17 times, and just making sure that it was all perfect, go back to the printer, get it back from the printer, it's perfect again, awesome, on sale, love it. And then it actually was kind of a financial success, which is good. That's not true for every project that is printed at a comics company. Oh, it was really fun, and I wish I could have kept going. I was hoping that I could continue kind of administrating the letter columns and fan art submissions and things for all of the Evangelion books, but the decision was kind of taken out of my hands. But for the time that I did get to do it, it was great. I did have a good time with just basically like taking people's fan letters and their fan art and being like, okay, we're gonna actually like we're gonna take it large. This is gonna be great. And then to just know that somebody's artwork gets published over and over again. That's why fan art is so fun. Because if your work gets selected, then it gets printed a lot and it's out there. It's kind of a thrill. So yeah, it's been good, and hopefully we're not done publishing Evangelion stuff, because my interest is undimmed, and with most of the people who I talk to who are Evangelion fans, they're all up for more. So hopefully we can get some more.
2007 would see the start of the Evangelion Rebuild movies by Studio Khara. The North American license was originally picked up by Funimation Entertainment, who would release the movies with English dubs directed by Mike McFarland. The first movie would be released on November 17, 2009, and the second movie would be released on March 29, 2011. The release of the third movie was a bit more complicated. Funimation would initially release it in theaters on January 10, 2014. This would become known as the theatrical version. They would later release it on Blu-ray and DVD with an updated dub and subtitles, heavily supervised by Khara, on February 2, 2016. This would be known as the home media version.
After we did the Death and Rebirth and End of Evangelion, and then they finally did that director's cut footage, and the Platinum Edition came out, I didn't necessarily expect there to be any more Evangelion after that.
As far as the rebuilds themselves go, I didn't really, I was as surprised as anyone. Grateful and happy to do it, but surprised. It's kind of like, well, how many times can you tell this story?
I was like, is this a joke? Because I really didn't expect, and I was like, wait, we're gonna redo, and that's when we went all the way back, right?
I was like, yes, I'm working again.
It was about maybe 2 years or so after, 2 or 3 years after the Platinum Edition came out, that Anno had said that he was going to do these new movies. He was going to do, it was honest to God, it was going to be 4 movies that came out within, 2 years or so, some very short timeline. Of course, it ended up taking forever. I think it took 15 years not 15, no, maybe 12 years, I guess, for all of them to finally come out. But that was very surprising to me.
Yeah, we made an offer, but at that point, because it was no longer Gainax, because it was now Khara, and because we had the issues with the live action, it was a very cautious offer.
That was with Funimation, right?
I don't remember exactly how I was contacted, but I know it was Funimation up in Dallas, and said, "Hey, come on up. We're gonna get this thing done." I was like, "Yay, let's do it."
Yeah, Mike McFarland hit me up.
They called me up and they said, I knew they had gotten the property, and they called up and said, "Hey, we're doing this, and would you like to reprise your role as Gendo?" And I'm like, "Well, absolutely, I'd love to."
Of course, 1.0 had already came out, and Asuka is clearly not in 1.0 because it's basically a retelling of the first 6 episodes of the TV show. But yeah, by that point, I knew, because it's a really good friend of mine, Mike McFarland, who was directing the rebuild films for Funimation. So he had told me that he was going to bring me in to do it. So yeah, I knew about that.
They were very, very concerned about retaining as much of the original cast as possible, which I was grateful for, but I was like, well, why is that? And some people started explaining to me that because it's a very good show, and the fans would go nutso if you changed it just willy-nilly.
Yeah, I work for their major competitor, not just work for them. I'm, an actual founder of their major competitor. So it's kind of like, it would be a very difficult working situation.
I was asked. The problem was they wanted me to fly myself in and put myself up in a hotel. And for what they were paying, that wouldn't have covered it. I wouldn't have even broken even. And at that time in my life, I just couldn't afford to.
We could make it work schedule-wise and budget-wise to make it worth us heading to Dallas to do that. So that'd be the main reason. It was purely financial. You're actors, you gotta make enough to travel to another city, and plus it was during the holidays. They were like, "Hey, can you just swing up to Dallas?" And it was like, "Well, we can't because of for various reasons."
I would prefer to have given the rebuild and everything else. I would prefer to have given it my own shot. And I think I'm on safe ground saying that there are fans out there who wish I had.
I didn't find out until some of them were already recorded. I don't think Funimation even knew that I was part. I mean, and I'd been recording other stuff with them, and I don't think they ever figured out, oh yeah, he was in this other thing.
Well, I was never a Funimation actor. A lot of ADV people would do double time, and they would go up to Funimation when they weren't recording something here. And that's a 4-hour drive. And I'm not a driver. I have severe ADHD. It's not safe for me to get behind the wheel of a car. So I didn't really have it in me to go back and forth. But when I heard about that, I knew a lot of my friends were probably going to be involved, but not me.
It would have been nice, but again, non-essential. There's plenty of Ibuki to go around.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't ask to do that.
Not that I know, not that I remember.
I was not. I think at that point I had been sort of, winding down my involvement with different anime shows, and so for something like Ava, of course, yes, I would absolutely have made an exception for that. Just again, given the legacy there and the prior involvement, yes.
Oh, if they had asked me, I would have respected that amazing opportunity. But nah, I just was never cut out to start doing that in the first place, so I didn't put myself in the running.
I was probably disappointed that I wasn't a part of the project, but that's part of acting. Rejection.
That's something I would have loved to have done.
I mean, all of us would have. I can't think of anybody that was like, you know what, I'm good.
That was recorded at the Funimation studio in Dallas, and I was living in Houston.
It was weird being in different studios, right?
I think I was in LA at the time. This was 2008, probably something like that. So yeah, I was in LA. So they flew me out to Dallas.
I had worked with them before. My very first project was working on Full Metal Alchemist with Mike McFarland, who also directed the movies for Funimation.
The first time I actually stayed with Mike McFarland. I think I stayed at his house the first time around. That was more of the reunion show. It's like, oh, we're going to do this again. I remember the character. I remember the story, the shows, and all that. And we just got to go through it all. It was great.
What I remember about the rebuilds was realizing, man, what a glorious blessing to have been a part, to get to be a part of something that is someone's willing to even go back and redo all over again and never realize. I think that's what I realized. I always knew it was a gift to be able to voice Misato, but not realizing how many people this show reached.
It was basically redoing all of the whole 26 episodes. That's the first rebuild. So it's like, oh, we get to do it again.
I remember with the rebuilds vocally, probably it being the most straining for me. Because I lived in Houston and I was working, and I think I was still teaching at the time. And, oh God, yeah. And the kids were little, and it was, that was maybe the first time outside of Amanda and Matt and like the OGs that I felt like, okay, there was kind of a new take on certain aspects of her and the other characters and stuff. And that was kind of very cool to be able to see and do.
I'm not jaded. I'm just doing what my teacher told me to do, that's all.
I think the way we said it was, we're going to age him up just a touch. I think the way we put it was, he dropped one ball. So he was a little more manly. A little bit more in the rebuild. Not a lot, but just a little bit more. So that was fun.
I tell you, Shinji, it's moments like these that make it all worthwhile, don't you think?
I think I definitely had to work to keep her younger by that time. I was tired too. I was a mom. You know what I mean? I was a little more run down during those rebuilds.
We'll resort to whatever means are required. If we're to succeed, there are 8 more angels that must be defeated.
You can't change the way Gendo's going to be. You know, you can't suddenly go, you know, I'm going to make him more compassionate this time around. I'm going to make him more loving and caring for Shinji. You know, I'm Shinji, would you please get in the robot? You know, you can't. No, that doesn't work. Gendo is one of those characters that has a deep love for his family. That's his good quality. His bad qualities are that in order to achieve what he wants to achieve, there's no apology needed. He's going to do whatever he has to do. The ends always justify the means with Gendo. And he doesn't care, even if it's at the detriment of his own son, you know, because what he sees is he's doing something that is ultimately good and is for a good purpose.
I did it all in like one day, maybe 2. I think we did like 8 hours straight, which was so hard. I won't do more than 4 hours at a time anymore. And seldom that. But yeah, it was like 8 hours, and then the next day I think we did a little bit of, you know, catch up and everything, and then flew back to LA.
The only difference is they just have a different technique of how they record.
That they used the beep system, I think, for the first time.
It's a beep system where you hear a series of 3 beeps in your headphones, and on the silent 4th beep, that's when you start saying your line.
Yes, they used the beep system, and that was like, I was like, okay, because you know, you get so used to how that worked. I loved watching. I mean, and I was able to grasp it pretty quickly, but that's something I remember the most.
I think I saw it at the Alamo Draft House in Houston. I think I had already seen 1.0 at that point. Yeah, it looks beautiful. It's probably the best of the rebuild films in terms of the story.
I just remember it was interesting that it was going in a different direction. And so that was all new. So I enjoyed that. I honestly, I don't even remember where all it went, but I know it went in more of a different direction. And so I thought that was pretty cool.
A show like that, you know, there's different not versions, but different iterations and different recordings, and you know, throughout the years and stuff. And it's pretty much the same. I mean, not a whole lot changes. You know, it's always just fun to go back and revisit that character.
That was fun. It was great. This time I was in a hotel. And we did go get some more barbecue.
Aren't you ashamed you were nowhere to be found during an angel attack?
I think it was a little bit different. There were some things that shifted, like in the rebuild films. Asuka basically has no relationship with Kaji whatsoever. You know, she doesn't really know him or have any particular feelings about him whatsoever. There's none of that.
With Kaji? I'll sit this one out, thanks. Cool, then I'll just hang out with you.
She really doesn't ever speak any German in the rebuild films. So that, you know, that was a really different thing. That was my most disappointing thing in doing the rebuild films.
You're the one who lost time first! Don't call!
Yeah, I think I talked to Mike about it, but it's just, you know, it's not really an aspect of her character anymore. It's not, she doesn't speak any Japanese. She doesn't speak any Japanese. She doesn't speak any German in the Japanese version. So it just didn't seem like, it's like, well, you know, that's just not an aspect of her character anymore, or something that we're going to bring out. So it just never came up. And of course, the biggest thing is by the time we're doing the rebuilds, now, of course, Evangelion is a huge global mega phenomenon. You know, that was what's different, is that when we started doing the TV series, when practically no one had heard of it or knew anything about it and had no expectations of it. Yeah, okay, now you're doing a movie that's part of this mega global franchise phenomenon, cult following, et cetera, et cetera. So that there was that aspect. That I didn't necessarily feel any pressure from that, because I just feel like, I know Asuka. I'm just here to be Asuka, so I can do that.
Also, generally speaking, in the Houston method, I'll call it the Houston method, the ADV Sentai way, we might go for a whole scene at once, whereas with Funimation, we might just do 2, maybe 3 lines at a time, and then make sure those fit, and then move on down the road.
So I remember what Mike would do is, after we finished recording everything, just to make sure that we had it all and it was all good, we went back at the end of the session, and we didn't watch the whole movie, but we watched every scene that Asuka was in, just to make sure that we had everything, and that he was happy with how it came out. I was happy with how it came out, that it was, that it was done, that it was good, and that we hadn't missed anything.
Mike McFarlane was the ADR director on those. And I love Mike. I think he's a wonderful director. He's a very good friend, and just an amazing person. But and while we have fun in sessions, he is all about getting it done and getting to business.
Oh, I love working with Mike. Mike is great.
It's so much fun. I wish I could do it all the time.
And he really got into it. He went back, he watched the whole TV series. He watched End of Eva, Death and Rebirth, End of Evangelion. He watched all of that. So he would be very thoroughly versed in the whole Eva lore. And but it was fun. I had worked with Mike before. I had recorded with him on Case Closed. I had worked with him on Full Metal Alchemist. So other than being friends with him, I'd also worked with him before. And, he wasn't trying to tell me how to be Asuka. It wasn't anything like that. Let me just tell you what this Asuka Langley is like, young lady, where there was none of that.
Michael McFarlane, I love you. And my favorite thing that Michael McFarlane says is, I know stuff about things and things about stuff. And that's what he says. And he really does. He knows a lot of stuff, and he knows a lot of things. But Mike McFarlane had, and I love his voice. I love hearing him perform, as well as his directing is stellar, I think.
He is, like I said, he's so funny that I would laugh and milk would come out my nose. And I hadn't been drinking milk. It was crazy. It was funny. It was nutty.
He's so good. He works quick. He works intentionally. He's an incredible actor, incredibly talented, incredible comedian. I think he's one of the most talented people I know. I'll say it on record. There, boom, said it.
Now, this one was interesting because I was sick as a dog. Flew me out, and my voice was wrecked. I still did it and still hit it and nailed it for the most part, but a couple of times you would hear my voice. I'm like, what is that? What? And they kept it in. I'm like, okay.
Nerve save us. But isn't this a part of Nerve too?
But yeah, it was that was rough on me, man. I almost passed out screaming a couple times. And that was a rough one.
Because it's been 14 years since you've opened your dumb eyes. Idiot Shinji.
And then, of course, when you get into the third movie, and now she's actually older, that was a big change there.
I loved her maturity, but she kind of became mean. She kind of became serious. I missed her playfulness in some of those. I will say that. But she was older. She was tired. Girl, she was like me. She was probably done with diapers and was starting menopause. Can you imagine Misato in menopause? That's awesome.
In all honesty, I'm 60 right now. So it's not like you go from I'm in my 40s and 50s to now I'm in my 60s. That just doesn't ring true. Your voice doesn't really change that. I mean, it's, I guess, always evolving, but it doesn't really have a drastic change. So, I think unless you fast forward, 50 years and you're just this decrepit old person, with a cane and a walker and all that, but it's, you don't really want to change it up too much. I think it would be too jarring for the audience.
The original 3.0 dub came out in movie theaters in the United States and Canada, January of 2014, I think. And, you know, we had recorded it summer of 2013. And so it had been many, many months. And I'm thinking, you know, why isn't it coming out? Why isn't it coming out? Well, so finally it had a limited theatrical release. And I wasn't able to go. I think I was at a convention or something that weekend.
And then I remember we went to New York Comic Con and we aired that 3.33 in front of 1,200 people, and they loved it. And Mike and I are up front going, cool, man, we saw this.
And I didn't get to go. I didn't get to see it. And I thought, oh, well, you know, that's okay. I'm sure it'll be out on DVD soon. Well, weeks go by, months go by. The DVD isn't coming out. Why isn't it coming out? You know, what's happening? And that summer of 2014, I get a call that I have to come back to Funimation because we're redoing it, or redoing most of it. I'm not sure if we redid the whole thing, but I know we redid a lot of it.
Yes, I kind of remember this. Yes. Did we suck? Is that why we redid that? Why did we redo that?
And then I had to come back to re-record a couple of things. I thought, okay, great, we're going to clean those up. I'm back. I'm ready to go. But I had to replace like one word here, one word there.
A lot of changes that I really didn't like, didn't care for. There was no concern about whether or not these redone lines that they wanted, whether or not they actually fit in the mouth movements. They didn't care about that. They wanted, and a lot of the stuff that just is so annoying to me. Like for years, I had always said stupid Shinji, which is alliterative, and also stupid is an adjective. And they wanted it to be idiot Shinji.
Stupid Shinji! Idiot Shinji!
I mean, basically they're synonymous, except that idiot is a noun and not an adjective. Idiot also has 3 syllables and not 2, so it doesn't necessarily fit in the same mouth movements. And also it was, established. It was very well established that she called him stupid Shinji. And to me, that's still canon. I've never liked idiot Shinji. I think it sounds stupid, and I just disagree with the whole thing. That's just like one little thing. We had originally, Asuka was just calling Mari 4 Eyes, and they wanted us to use that word crony, which is not used like that in English. I mean, I've been a native English speaker for my whole life, and I've never just called someone a crony. That it's not the way that word is used. It's used in very, very specific circumstances, like a political crony or cronyism. And I understand there was something that they were trying to imply or suggest about Mari's character or her backstory by use of that word.
Hey, 4 Eyes! 4-eyed crony!
4-eyed crony. I hate it. I hate it every time I had to say it. I don't like it. I disagree with it so strongly. I think it sounds terrible. I would never have put that in the script if I was writing the script, and if I had any control over what I actually got to say, I would never have said it. Hated it. Hated it. Hated it. I think it's dumb. Nobody talks like that. I get that they're trying to make some kind of a statement about, but you don't have to use it over and over again. Hey, you crony, you. It's just, no. In English, that's just not how we use that word. It's just not. Sorry, I could go on about crony for so long because I feel so deeply passionate about it, and I hate it so much. I just hate it so much. So much. One thing was that they really wanted me way too many times to call Shinji a brat. That was a big one, to keep calling him a brat. I hated it. It's fine if you say it once or twice, but I probably said it 10 times or maybe more than that. I didn't like it. I thought it was dumb.
Dumbass. You damn brat.
My favorite line that they cut out, which I heard got a big response in the movie theaters, but Asuka had a line where, talking about Shinji, she says, he's not just an idiot, he's an asshole. And that got changed to, he's not just an idiot, he's a brat.
He's not an idiot, he's an asshole. He's not an idiot, he's a brat.
Well, we had minders. We had two people from Studio Kara. Dan Kanamitsu was in there, and then there was another lady I didn't know. She was in the studio, and they were watching the whole time, which has not been my typical experience working in anime. That's not been a normal thing. And like I said, that they were wanting changes to the lines that were really meaningless, like calling Shinji an idiot instead of saying stupid. It's like they're synonyms essentially. It shouldn't matter, and do what, I don't know. Anyway, so having them in the studio, that was very, very challenging.
I don't know that they were sitting in my session, but I remember them being there to like meet with them.
I've never, ever listened to the redub that we did on that, on 3.0. In fact, I've never listened to the dub of 3.0 at all. I haven't, because I don't want to hear it. It annoys me too much.
Come on.
You know, I love going to Funimation. I love they're not there anymore, I don't think, over in Flower Mound, but it was just great because I would go in, I'd say, oh, I'm going to be working on this thing, so I'd go around and I'd say hi to everybody and how you doing and what's been going on with you, and then I'd go into the booth and do my thing and then go. So it was really fun. It was nice because we don't get to see each other that much because we're all doing our own thing, and when you're in the booth, it's just you and the director. There's not everybody around. So all these people that you've known over the years, you don't really get the chance to see them. So going there, it was really nice to be able to say hi to everybody.
I remember being like, I am single-handedly watching a genre, or I've been able to be like a little mouse, you know, watching a genre of entertainment from back in 94 when I started with Golden Boy to here. And here we are still doing this show, right? Still doing this one show and being like, I still like Misato, first of all. I still love shit, you know, and thinking this is so much bigger than I ever imagined it to be. Not just about being grandiose or whatever, but just the magnitude of what this show has represented to so many people. You know, so I remember the difference being, and my memories were good, but of going in there and being like, seeing posters of way back when we were on the tapes and things and signatures that I'd signed and things that they would bring to me to sign and being like, and they're like, oh, hi, I watched you. And like the people that now ran Funimation were ones that watched it when I was doing it back then. That was one of the biggest things I remember. But the people that were now employing me and I was still doing that voice were the ones that grew up watching it. That was cool. That was cool.
Next time on Bringing Evangelion to America, we'll finally wrap things up. We'll take a look at the Netflix dub, the Amazon dub, the localization of the anime light novels, and the future and legacy of Evangelion in America. And there will also be plenty of fan service.